The South African Local Government Association, that SALGA, is now encouraging or calling for a better response to deal with disasters in the country, especially a better disaster management framework, if you will. The association says that delays in reviewing the system, despite a 2022 cabinet directive, have left local governments struggling to respond to increasing incidents of flooding, storms, drought, and even fires. Outdated tools have also been flagged in some of these communities. Let's speak to SALGA Chairperson of the Emergency and Disaster Working Group, Mluleki. Nkosi, good to have you on the SABC News channel this evening, sir. Let's start with that. The areas that you would say in the response to the flooding in places like Limpopo and Mpumalanga this month, where you found the response to be lacking, where are the glaring gaps?
No, thank you very much for having us, and good evening to your viewers and, at home. And let's first pass our sincere condolences to family that have lost their loved ones due to these disasters in Limpopo and Mpumalanga. What prompted us to issue the statement that relate to the speedy implementation of the overhaul of disaster management is the slow pace at which we get the recovery for the victims of these floods, meaning communities in general. Children did not go to school, we have seen that, and so we have been proposing this from 2022. And the minister acceded at the time, but up to now it has not been fulfilled. And municipalities are experiencing disaster year in and year out. That is why we felt that we have to push to get the other spheres of government so that we review this legislation.
So if the minister had agreed with you about 4 years ago already that there is a need to move in this direction, why have we not seen anything come of that, when you consider that from 2021 in KZN alone, we've seen a worsening situation regarding extreme rainfall?
We don't see any political problem with this issue because disaster affects all of us. And now the ball is at the Parliament's court to process this legislation so that we can come out from this debacle of disaster. We don't want to respond to disasters. We want now to be proactive in terms of risk reduction and resilience. That is what we want basically to happen, and so that we can also fix the scattered responsibilities from the three spheres of government, who is doing who at what time and who needs to do what at what time. So that on its own is creating some form of red tape and bureaucracy when we have to respond to disasters.
But what response do you then receive? For example, when you and I started chatting, you were talking about conversations as far back as 2022. We're now in 2026. What follow-up have you done to make sure that government does indeed act to put in place the necessary response mechanisms? And when you do have those conversations, if indeed they've happened, what do they tell you is the reason for the delay?
In actual fact, we are working together with the National Disaster Management Center such that we have embarked on a benchmarking study tour in partnership with them. We have gone to Malawi and Brazil, which are countries that we have the very same disasters. And this study tours strengthen our work to develop a local government policy position that is going to assist municipalities. So our view is that we have expressed that for years, and now we have spoken to the minister. We had 2 meetings during these disasters, that we hope that this legislation must be in place in this financial year of 2025-2026. So we hope that the minister will assist in that regard. But there has been an engagement from us. Even last year, during the disasters, even in KZN, we did raise this matter.
And I want to talk about the other issue that you've raised as a gap in South Africa's disaster response planning, and that's to do with municipalities and the lack of capacity there. That's hugely problematic because municipalities, given their role, would have to be the first port of call for people who find themselves facing the risk of flooding, etc. Is it that the capacity was never built up, or has it been eroded over the years?
Well, as I indicated earlier, there is also a reactive culture where funding is unlocked after a disaster occurs, rather than being invested in the prevention of the disaster. That is the main change that we want in this legislation. So what we are proposing, we know that disaster, if you can check, it's always striking in rural areas. And in rural areas, I indicated previously that we have issues that relate to overregulation of local government. I want to relate it by an example that why we do not have capacity in the rural areas municipalities on issues that relate to categorization of municipalities, where you find a grade 3 municipality in the rurals of the rurals in the Eastern Cape. When you want to appoint a CFO or an engineer, for a CFO in particular, the requirements according to the regulations are a BCom accounting degree with 7 years experience, 5 years of which is from local government, and the commencing salary is 900,000. So where will you get a CFO that has got 500,000, that has got a BCom degree in accounting and 5 years experience that earns less than 2 million? So those are challenges that we have addressed with the Minister of Culture, Minister SABC, that we must also change legislation in terms of this categorization of municipalities. No one wants to go, no professionals want to go to rural areas. Hence, we have those challenges. These are part of the issues that are not talked about when we say municipalities does not have capacity.
And speaking of money, sir, very briefly, the president, when he was in Limpopo at the end of last week to see what the floods have done there, spoke about how we need to make sure that there's no waste of the funds that will now be freed up. There's now a disaster declaration in place to respond to the flooding. Do you share the concern about these monies and other resources being abused, stolen, possibly not reaching the victims of this natural disaster?
That is why I'm raising this issue that I just raised, that it does not help to give 200 million to municipalities that does not have capacity to spend in a particular period of time. But SALGA has forwarded some professionals and officials that will assist those municipalities that are lacking for them to be able to make proper plans, to make proper procurement processes so that that money does not go to be spent in a manner that is not intended to. So it is true, the president is correct by saying that we need to check and do checks and balances that the money is spent for the intended work.
Thank you very much for talking to us, Chairperson of the South African Local Government Association's Emergency and Disaster Working Group, Mluleki Nkosi.